Hey Electrom fans, I thought I'd shoot a quick video talking about a trip that I'm about to take. I am heading up Vancouver Island. It's about a 230 kilometer trip. Right now I've just come ashore in Mill Bay on Vancouver Island, and I'm going to be cruising up on the side of the highway. And I'm actually running a new motor today, and I thought I'd like to talk a little bit about that new motor because it's a little better at high speed and a little more efficient at high speed. So the motor I'm running it's still a 9 Continents 212 motor, and we can kind of see that in there. But this is the 9 Continents 212 fast wind motor. And what this motor does is it's got a different winding on the core, which makes it have a higher top speed, which is nice, but more important to me, it's more efficient at a higher speed. So the sweet spot for this motor is at about 60 to 65 kilometers per hour is when it kind of crosses that threshold into the most efficient kind of speed, and 60 kilometers per hour is a great speed for me on the side of the highway. Here in British Columbia, our provincial highways have a beautiful about 6 foot wide strip on the side of them that only a bicycle is allowed to use. And so this is a great place for me to hang out on the Electrom going 60 kilometers per hour. Hey folks, I missed a key piece of information, so I thought I'd better put that in here. One of the things to remember when we go to a faster wind motor, we do have to give something up in return to get that higher top speed and that higher top speed efficiency. And what we are giving up is torque. So the 9 Continents 212 motor in a 20-inch wheel, when I'm running the standard wind motor, the sweet spot is about 55 kilometers per hour in terms of motor efficiency, and it outputs 110 Newton meters of torque. Versus when I am running the 9 Continents fast wind motor, its sweet spot for efficiency and high speed is about 65 kilometers per hour, but it only outputs about 90 Newton meters of torque. And the fact is, if you're doing a lot of hill climbing and things like that, and you're only running a single motor, the fast wind motor would not be a good choice because it just doesn't have the hill climbing torque. But what makes it work here on the Electrom is that we're running a dual motor system. And on the front of the bike, we have got the GMAC Geared hub motor. And this little hub motor, because it has a 5-to-1 planetary gear reduction, it provides us all that torque we need for those hill climbing situations. And then because we're running smart controllers, that motor shuts down once we're up above a certain speed to save on power. So in this way, we get the best of both worlds. We have the high speed, high efficiency of a fast wind direct drive motor in the rear, and then we actually have that hill climbing and startup torque of a geared hub motor in the front, and the two work together to make the Electrom a really phenomenal all-purpose machine. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this 9 Continents 212 hub motor. It's called a 212 because it has a 212 millimeter stator, which is the inner core of the motor, and the bigger that stator, the more torque the motor supplies, because you're working on a larger ring of magnets in relation to the size of the wheel. So this 212 motor is a little bit bigger than normal. Most of the time they're 208 or 208 millimeter stators. So this motor supplies a little bit more torque than your average hub motor for the power you put into it, but yet it's still quite efficient. And I am running hub sink heat sinks and what's called stator aid, which is a ferrofluid. And the hub sinks and the ferrofluid work together to conduct the heat from the core of the magnet out and then radiate it out. So this allows this motor to run a little bit more power than would typically be able to handle, and yet still stay cool. And this is pretty helpful when you're running the higher power limits that I need to run at 60 to 65 kilometers per hour continuously. Now, I should make it clear that if I'm operating in the city and using bicycle infrastructure, I don't go 60 kilometers per hour. And I should also make it clear that 60 kilometers per hour when you're a bicycle is not legal. So this is in a bit of a gray area for me. However, on the side of a provincial highway where there's no other pedestrian and bicycle traffic, I feel fairly comfortable morally in doing this. And today I'm running the good old Electrom, and I'll be putting on my Aeros, which will even improve the bike a little bit more in terms of aerodynamics. And I'll shoot a little bit of video on the way so that you guys can get a sense of how efficiently the motor is working. The Aeros is a nice lightweight lycra cover that folds up easily and I can store easily in the tail box. And then I just put it on for longer trips because it's not super convenient to use when you're getting on and off the bike in the city. It's a little bit more elaborate to crawl down into it. But what's also nice about it is that it does present a bigger surface area to cross winds. And so if it's a really windy day, I can take it off and I won't get blown around as much. So you're always kind of judging that kind of crossover between efficiency and safety. Okay, well that's it. Aeros on. Now all I have to do is climb into it and I'm ready to roll. So for today's trip, I've given myself a top output of 2,000 watts and a top speed of 60 kilometers per hour. And I'm just going to reset my cycle analyst. So we've drawn 0 amps and we've gone 0 kilometers, and we'll just keep track of this. Now I'm a little bit part of the way into my journey, so we'll just be recording about 200 kilometers of this trip, but we'll get a sense of how many amp hours per kilometer I'm getting. Okay, there we go. I'm ready to roll. Okay, so I've just pulled off the side of the highway so we could check in on our numbers here. We're doing pretty well. We have used 15.3 amp hours out of our 80 amp hour pack, and we've gone 58.7 kilometers. But it's hard to compare that number to other e-motorcycles and e-bikes. So let's go to the watt hours per kilometer screen on the cycle analyst. And here we can see our net watt hours per kilometer. So that's what we're actually using once we figure in how much I'm generating through the pedals. Our net watt hours per kilometer is 20.5 watt hours per kilometer. Now, that's really efficient. That is a great number. Now, compared to a low-powered e-bike, a low-powered e-bike would typically do, I think, between 10 and 20 watt hours per kilometer. But when you consider the Electrom is running at 60 kilometers per hour, an efficiency of 20.5 watt hours per kilometer is really good. Just to go over the settings that I'm using to achieve these kind of numbers. The Electrom is a very powerful vehicle and can draw a lot of current. But when we're trying to achieve long distance mileage, then it helps to limit that amount of power and get a more efficient run. So today I'm running with a top allowed speed of 60 kilometers per hour, and the maximum draw that the motors can do is 2,000 watts. Now, that's pretty low when you consider the Electrom, when it's fully ungoverned in its off-road setting, can draw upwards of 5,000 watts. But that 2,000 watt maximum will allow me to get a really nice range out of the batteries that I'm carrying, and it's still powerful enough that I don't feel too slow on the highway to be safe. Okay, I've just pulled over to see if I can get this out. So I'm just going through town there. The top speed allowed in that town was 70K, so traffic wasn't passing me too fast. Pretty soon I'm going to be out on the highway, and you can see what it's actually like to ride the Electrom with highway traffic going by. The wind has picked up a bit, so I'm getting blown around a bit, but it's still not so windy that I can't keep the bearing. even with the Aeros on. So I'm going to keep her going. I'm almost 150K, and I got some 41 amp hours. Looking good for the trip. Okay, well, I've made it to my destination. As you can see, I took the Aeros off. I actually took it off on the ferry coming over because once I was done my highway miles, I didn't really need that extra aerodynamics, and it's a bit of a hassle to climb in and out of. And as well, I did have to crank the speed up a little bit because I was running late for the ferry. So that will have affected our watt hours per kilometer a little bit. But in general, I think the bike performed really well. So let's have a look at some of these numbers and see how we did. Distance traveled from the time I reset the odometer was 221 kilometers, and I actually had traveled 21 kilometers before that, so basically 240 kilometers was today's trip. And we'll click through the cycle analyst. We used 67.6 amp hours of power, but once again I did reset the odometer, so we have to tack on another 10 amp hours. So in total we actually used 77 amp hours. And remember, I am running the extra batteries in the tail box, so I have an 80 amp hour battery pack. And then the actual trip was 4 hours and 51 seconds, so basically 4 hours of traveling time. My max speed, and this is a little bit misleading, my max speed was 85 kilometers per hour, but that's set on a downhill. The Electrom cannot go that fast on a flat, and you know, I probably, I got to 85 kilometers per hour once on a really steep downhill. My average speed was 55 kilometers per hour, which is a nice average speed. I find the Electrom is really comfortable at that speed. And that's kind of a sweet spot for this vehicle. As I mentioned earlier, with the high-speed 9 Continents 212 motor, between 55 and 65 kilometers per hour is kind of the sweet spot for the efficiency of that motor. And that was why I had the top speed set at 60 kilometers, because that's kind of where I wanted to be. But obviously, if you're only allowing the system to draw 2,000 watts, when you're climbing a steeper hill, you're going to slow down quite a bit. And that's why that average speed is only 55. Still quite respectable. And overall, I'm very happy with those numbers for this trip. When you consider that I did 240 kilometers worth of travel on the same power that an electric car would consume in about 10 or 15 kilometers. So there's a big win for the Electrom. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you on a future episode.